Go, bro. Finish this shit. Come on, Kimbo. Let's get this shit, bro. Finish this shit, bro.
Close that distance. Close that distance.
Come on, Sean.
Keep working. Keep clench. Keep clench.
Come on, bro. Hit it, go. Hit it, bro. Hit it. Go third. Hit it, bro.
It's all you, bro.
So what you just watched were the opening seconds of an underground bare-knuckle boxing match that took place in the mid-2000s between a man named Kimbo Slice and Sean Gannon. So everybody knows who Kimbo Slice is. He was the man back in the day. He would end up having underground bare-knuckle boxing matches in backyards in Florida and basically anywhere else that he could find. And he would end up transitioning into MMA and pro boxing. He was really legendary, and to this day, a lot of people still hold a deep, deep respect for him. Now, of all the fights Kimbo Slice ever had, this one right here is probably the most circulated. And I think the reason why is because it's the one underground bare-knuckle boxing match that Kimbo would end up losing. Which brings me to Sean Gannon. Sean Gannon was a Boston police officer who ended up getting into MMA. And not only was he just a really, really nice guy, because of this fight, he ended up becoming a local legend in addition to getting a fight in the UFC. Now, I don't know how well you can see. After all, this was filmed in, I believe, 2004, so camera technology was not that great. But if you turn your attention to this man right here in the bone white pants, that's actually my MMA coach, Mike Varner. My MMA coach was not only a training partner and good friend of Sean Gannon's, but he was also there on the day, and he basically knew about everything leading up to that fateful day. And I figured since Sean Gannon passed away in late 2021, and it's actually been about a year since he passed, it would be really, really cool and also a really fitting tribute to him to have my coach tell this story of his finest hour. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and we're going to let my coach tell this story now.
So my name's Mike Varner. I'm part of a team, and I still say I am. We'll always be a family. But I trained back in the 2000s, early 2000s, I think maybe 2001-ish. I went to a school called the Boneyard in Taunton, Mass. My friend Bobby Diaz, who I had known for many years prior, was training out of there. And at that time, prior to the Boneyard, I was just, someone kind of doing some crazy stuff. I was into the rave scene, running parties, and I was getting in trouble. So my friend Bobby, who was already doing martial arts, I had asked him about getting involved with martial arts. I didn't even know he was doing the MMA scene. And I was watching the UFC at the time, Pride, and I was just like, man, that would be crazy to get involved with that. So I made a comment to Bobby one day, and he said, hey, man, we're training at the Boneyard. And we're doing that cage fighting stuff, so I went down there. Not knowing what I was getting myself involved with, the sport, how intense it was, I went down, trained, and I was like, wow. And years later, Mike Littlefield, who owns the Boneyard with Mike True, had said to me, we all thought that you never would stick with it. We thought that first couple of days you came in there, it was just kind of a phase and you never would last. But I'll admit, yeah, you have to want to be a fighter. If you're just somebody who thinks that you can do it and then starting it, if that's your mentality, you will get beat out of there. But I stuck with it. Anyways, that's how I got involved with the Boneyard. And like I said, Mike Littlefield was the owner, Bobby Diaz was one of the head coaches there. And yeah, a great journey embarked. I met Sean Gannon, as to why we're here talking about Sean Gannon. I met him. I just don't remember if he was there prior to me. I don't think so. I think Sean kind of came into the scene maybe a year or two after. He was training elsewhere. Sean was and had always been somebody that was accepted into every school. He took a little from everybody, but we were his main fight school. And then he would branch out to other schools and do some cross training. So Sean was training with us, and then we went from one school, one location on Main Street in Raynham, right across the street from the Milk Bottle. So I think it was Raynham, Taunton line. Then we went down to Taunton on the Green, where the Boneyard had finalized. So the Boneyard started one school before the Raynham location across from the Milk Bottle. I wasn't there. I came in when they were at the milk bottle location. Then we went down to the Taunton location on the green, and that's where all my memory now hits me. You know, Sean's down there, I'm down there, some real awesome training partners and friends are all training there. And now I remember, like Littlefield and Bobby and Sean always talking about these YouTube fights. And I kept on hearing Kimbo Slice's name. And, you know, like I said, prior to getting into the fight scene, I had my own little scene that I was involved with, which when I started fighting, I was still involved in that scene. So my mind was preoccupied with my old past life. So I never really paid much attention to what they were talking about, these YouTube fights. So now we fast forward, we're training, and now we become friendly. We become outside of the boneyard. We're hanging out, we're doing things together. And when I went to Sean's, not his wake, but they had a remembrance day for him after he had passed away, and his brother spoke about his you know, how smart he was, things that, like the books that he would read, the things that he would do. And I started remembering back when I would have conversations with Sean, and how detailed he was in these conversations I would have with him. He wasn't just having a conversation and just blow you off. He would ask detailed questions. So the point I'm making about Sean was that he was like a high intellect individual. So when it came to the whole fight with Kimbo, it made sense. So he broke this whole thing down. So I started overhearing the conversations that Sean's going to fight Kimbo Slice, who's this YouTube guy. So I started watching these fights of Kimbo Slice. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. So Sean says, listen, he's probably the most famous YouTube guy. If I fight this guy and beat this guy, it's going to give me a chance to get in the UFC. So he wasn't looking at it just a street fight. He was very methodical about it. I fight him, I become famous, I get a fight in the UFC. That's what he wanted. He wanted it, and he was right. That's what it did, and he knew this. He had that insight. So now Mike Littlefield starts talking to Mikey Ice, who's Kimbo's manager. So those that don't know, I think a lot of people do know that they came from the porn world. So Kimbo was a bodyguard for these women that Mikey Ice would have come and do their thing, right? So Kimbo was just a person that was protecting people, but he liked fighting. So he started fighting, and then he realized he could make money. And then Mikey Ice, being his manager, was able to negotiate these payouts. So they would bring money to the table. Each team would bring money to these backyards, and the winner would leave with all. So this is what happened. Mikey Littlefield negotiated this fight. So the fight happens, and it happened in Rhode Island, not in Massachusetts. So it happened in one of my friend's schools. And I remember we all drove down there that night. We knew a bunch of us were going down, maybe 30 people from the fight world. People were handpicked to go down there. And Kimbo had maybe about 8, 9 people coming up from Florida. So we get there early. Sean and I were all in there. And so we all had like a little job while we were in there to protect certain areas of the room. If anything were to go down, that we're jumping on somebody. But, we would just hope that didn't happen. Nobody wanted that to happen. Here we are fighters. Did we have instances outside of the cage? Absolutely. Where we'd go out because we were still young. We were out clubbing. Were there jerks out there? Yeah. Did we find some excitement in getting into these little brawls? Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, man. Yeah, it was kind of cool. But we were never out looking for trouble. So we were hoping for no trouble that day, but we made preparations. So Sean comes to me, and he hands me his money. So the money was $5,000. So $10,000 is what you win. Each team brings $5,000. Sean had given me his $5,000 because Mike and Bobby were dealing with him, getting him ready in the back room for this fight. So we come up there. Sean and Bobby and Mike are gone. They're in the back room getting him ready, getting him in the mental mindset. I had his money. Now we're all waiting for Kimbo to come up. So we hear he shows up. A little funny story though. Before we entered the room, we all had to relinquish our cell phones. So all the cell phones had to go in the idea was that you don't only win the money, you win the rights to the video, the selling rights to these videos. So all that video that went viral, money was made on that. So they didn't want any of us filming it secretly so we can post it on any social media, right? So we had to give our cell phones up, put them in a bucket. So we come in, and these are our friends, right? Now, when Kimbo comes up, we're all in there. Kimbo's entourage comes up. They come right through the doors. They didn't give up any cell phones. That was the weirdest thing about it, that all our friends, who it's ours, friends' facility, never said to them, you have to give up your cell phones. That was the weird thing about it. So they all come in. They're about 9 deep with Kimbo. So Kimbo comes into the room, doesn't burst into the room, just walks into the room. He has a leather jacket. I remember he has his black sneakers and he has his gray pants, and boom, he takes off his jacket. I believe he had a white tank top off, takes that off, and he just starts pacing up and down the room. And I'm in there, he's just pacing up and down the room. It's surreal, man. We're like, because we're club fighters. We're fighting, in the cage. We're not used to like this, maybe what they think maybe gangster fighting stuff. So we're just like, wow, this is cool. So Sean's in the back room getting ready, and his brother, who you see holding that briefcase with that dark beigey jacket, that's his brother. And he's like, where's Sean? Where's Sean? Get Sean out here. So we're waiting for Sean to come out. And we have our like little areas that we're gonna hold tight if anything were to happen. So I run to the back. I'm like, hey, we gotta get Sean out here. They're waiting for Sean. Sean comes out of the door. I just remember seeing this look in Sean. Comes out, just boom. I can't even describe what his look is. I mean, his look is just blank. He comes out, he walks over to the mat area, and then as he's walking, you see him come alive. Boom, they square up and the fight happens. So in the video that everybody sees, like you see, I can tell you what I see, but you see it. You see different angles. You see what's going on with the people around us. You see people in white shirts. You see Mikey Ice. You see, I think his brother kept that brown jacket on. And we were all respectful to one another. So the fight happens, but the rules of the fight going into this were there were supposed to be no takedowns. That was it. Just no go on the ground. There was never any discussion about elbows. I think maybe headbutts, eye gouges, those were talked about. I wasn't in the rules meeting, but just talking afterwards with my friends. That was it. There was no headbutts. There was no, elbows were never mentioned. No elbows, no eye gouging, no headbutts, and no takedowns. So the fight's happening. Sean rocks Kimbo. What does Kimbo do? Goes in for a takedown. He does the first violation. So the first thing that was said not to do, he does. He tries to take Sean, and I think he takes Sean down. But we never said anything. You didn't see us jumping in because we knew Sean could handle himself on the ground. Fight gets back up. Sean gets back to his feet. And he starts, I don't remember if it was the elbow or maybe the clinch or the knees. There was something. And his brother starts jumping in and screaming, there's no that. No. They were legal. So elbows were allowed, knees were allowed. They were never said that they couldn't be used. But they were jumping in, trying to prevent us from using them. So we jump in. So we outweighed them. We had so many more people, and we were fighters. So we knew how much we could allow for them jumping in. So the fights start to resume. A couple of elbows were thrown. I think even Kimbo threw an elbow. So the fight continued, right? No more interruptions. Then it was a 1/1000 all the way up, if I believe, to 20. It was either 20 or 30, I believe, but it was 20. So you saw Kimbo went down. Sean never went down. Kimbo goes down, and we all counted, and nobody rushed to count. In 1/1001, 1/1002, Kimbo gets up. I think he gets up twice, okay? But we all see that. What we don't see at the very end, we see Kimbo get counted out, which Kimbo's team doesn't deny. Clean win, Sean wins. we get the money. At some point, you know, I got the money from his brother. All cool. What people don't see, I don't think, with the cameras is you do hear his brother saying, "Get up, Bird, get up, Bird." Right? Get up. Like rather than, "Oh man, Kimbo, you okay, man? Kimbo, get up." He fought his heart out, he's unconscious, he's out. And his crew are, I don't remember them kicking him, but I think maybe one, like his brother maybe like hit him like, "Come on, get up, Bird." So he's counted out. So what we did was we surrounded Kimbo. We pushed all his guys away to give him air, to help him up, to help him regain. And my recollection was, it could be a little wrong, but my recollection was, we all helped with his team, with his boys, with Mikey, who was cool, and got Kimbo out of the building into an SUV. So I don't think they brought Kimbo because the story I heard after was that they actually went out partying later after he came to, but we helped him down the stairs, got him into the SUV, and boom, they went on their way. Then we had to get Sean, because if you see, Sean's eyes were closed. He couldn't see out of his eyes any longer. So we got him to the hospital. We did the right thing. We're not idiots. We fight in the cage professionally. We get injured, we go to the hospital. So we brought Sean to the hospital. And he could not stop, man. He was so happy, man. Like the kid, it brings tears to my eyes, man. Like he was just so happy. Man, he did what he knew he could do. And if he did it, it would get him to what the next part of the story is, and it happened. But so he recovers, but Sean had he had some injuries. He had some shoulder injuries. So if you see those tattoos Sean has on him, those are because he had shoulder surgeries. He had a rotator cuff surgery injuries. So that's why he had those tattoos to cover up those scars. So he wins the fight, and now, Mike and Sean, like Sean did a lot of the leg work. Sean is an extremely intelligent person, as I said. So he was able to negotiate and talk and get to the people he needed to get to. So I don't know how all that happened, who we spoke to, but we had connections to Dana. Dana was a Boston guy. So Dana was interested. He was interested in Sean because how big of that fight was on the internet. So he got his fight. He got his contract deal, but the UFC wanted him to fight instantly. He wanted that to happen soon because of how popular it was. But Sean had to have the surgery, heal from the surgery, and then there were some things that had happened with his job. So nothing that I'm saying is I'm not divulging anything that didn't come out. He was a police officer, and they were pissed. This fight happens, brings much recognition to MMA. Sean's on the cover of the Herald. So these people, I don't think it was Captain O'Rourke or Patricia Miller, they didn't care. But this guy who was a tax auditor, Joe DiNucci, was a big boxing guy. These people didn't want to see boxing go and be second to MMA. And MMA was up and coming. It was huge. And because of their hatred towards it, their ignorance, whatever negative word I can use to describe it, they didn't want to see MMA come. And Sean was bringing popularity to it. But these politicians who are evil, who have connections with the Boston PD, put the pressure to get Sean fired. Because there were other cops who were boxing. They were boxing. And they never had an issue. Why bring it down on Sean Gannon? Why? Because he's doing MMA. Oh, they used moonlighting. So it was political and personal crap that got Sean fired from the police department. Pure corruption, absolutely. So he was dealing with that. He was dealing with the injuries, and it held his fight off from fighting in the UFC. But the UFC made good. But the best thing that the UFC would have done was put Sean with another striker. Sean was a striker. He was a really good striker, but his level of jiu-jitsu didn't match his striking. So they put him against a wrestler. Why they put him against a wrestler? I personally believed that they weren't happy with how long it took Sean to make this fight happen. But Sean had to deal with some legality with the police, and he had to deal with his injuries. And then he fights on in Connecticut, and he loses that fight. You know, so the hopes were that he would, you know, win his fight in the UFC and continue fighting in the UFC. And you know, Sean loved fighting. Sean genuinely loved fighting. Sean genuinely loved being a cop. And you know, losing that fight, he didn't get a second fight in the UFC. Lost his you know, the contract is that the UFC, once you lose, they have the right to dismiss. If you win your fight, you go on to your next. And you know, that's the story. That's the story of him getting into the UFC all through his knowing fighting Kimbo. So then, you know, that kind of, I think, went quiet for a while. Kimbo continued to fight on. Kimbo still put out his stuff, but if you see his stuff today, there's no mention of his fight with Sean. Why, you know, he's not producing those fights. He's not showing that side of it because he lost that fight. And Kimbo, you know, Sean went on relishing in that win, which rightfully he did. Like, Sean was going to all the local shows, man. He was a town, town hero. Everybody loved Sean. The way he'd come into events, man, he'd come in being announced, you know, into the stage as the Kimbo Destroyer. You know, he continued, you know, to fight, you know, thereafter. Right. So they never met prior. I'm confident of that. But you know, afterwards, I don't see where they would have met. I don't think there was any events like all the local events. I do remember that Kimbo did come up to, I think, the Shriners Auditorium. Joe Cavalera had an event up there, and I think that he did bring Kimbo up to showcase him. And I would imagine that he did bring Sean in, because Sean went to every local event. You know, he was, Sean could train at any school. He could walk into any school, any event, you know, no invite needed, you know, or no him having to ask for permission. But I don't remember if Sean and Kimbo are up at the Shriners Auditorium or not. Well, like the experience from fighting Kimbo as he got older was that, you know, he was just the guy that beat Kimbo. You know, he was the guy that was known that beat Kimbo, and he liked that. He liked that attention, and I liked that for him, because that was a massive achievement. He's the only guy that beat Kimbo, you know, other than in the UFC, and that is huge. I mean, that is cool. I mean, because those street fights, everybody talks about what's going on in the world right now. People pulling guns, 5 people jumping on one. That's shit. That's bullshit, man. Those are punk ass. This was the real deal. These were and not that I condone any street fighting. I think it's, ugh. You know, then I was into it, but I was still coming out of my shady world. But where I am today, you know, I don't think it's cool people do these backyard fights. It's just too much risk for injury. But what I am admirable is that people do it one-on-one, and they make it as safe as possible. And then, you know, you see people, and that's what I liked about Kimbo. Like, you see after the fights, he's shaking his opponent's hand. Yeah, that was what I liked about it. So, so the fact that Sean beat him in this, that was fair, you know, fair and square. That I love the fact that he was known when he went anywhere, that people looked at him as like this, like royalty. I thought that was really, really cool. And I like that he liked that. That when he went somewhere, that he got that attention. He deserved that attention. And you know, I don't remember how many fights he had after that. Leading, you know, I remember all the fights leading up to it. I don't remember who all they were. Like Mike Dexter was an awesome fight that he had. I don't remember where all the fights were, but I was at all of his fights, because we were a team. But you know, at some point, you know, the loss of the UFC and the injuries that he had, and dealing with all the police stuff, you know, taxed him. So it ended his career. But he still trained. That's the one thing that trained. Like, he trained here. He would come here. He would train everywhere. He was a technician of martial arts. He continued, you know, sharpening his sword. My first recollection of Sean being a cop, I went into Boston one night. He was working in Faneuil Hall. He was doing a detail in Faneuil Hall. I remember the story so vividly. And I just went in to see Sean, and he said, pop in. I forget what bar it was. So I go into this bar, and I say, hey, I'm here to see Sean Gannon. He's doing a detail. He's a training partner of mine. And I look over, and Sean has his hat on a woman. A woman has his hat on her, and he's just like this figure. People just hanging, talking to Sean. No, don't get me wrong. He's doing his cop stuff. But he's doing what I think cops should do. He's interacting with the crowd. He's watching them, and people are just gravitated towards him because he is such a charismatic individual. So, Sean and I, you talk and we do our thing. But that was my first remembrance of him as a cop. Like, I don't remember him any other time before that. I mean, Kimbo, I'm going to tell you, Kimbo is the man. I met Kimbo twice thereafter, which I'll tell in a second. I actually fought on a fight card where he was the main event. Kimbo, man, was the man. Man, we had so much respect for that guy. And we didn't know much about his story. And after, when he went on The Ultimate Fighter, some people disrespect him. He wasn't a real fighter. No, Kimbo was the real deal. He was just a man who did what he did in that business and wanted to fight and made some money. It's the people who exploited him and the people who didn't understand the fight world who were the scumbags. We had so much respect for Kimbo. And I had the opportunity to meet Kimbo both at a press conference and then at the fight that I fought at the Trump Plaza where I fought Nick Serra. Now, at the Trump Plaza, at the New York press conference, at the second time I met Kimbo, I never really met and talked to Kimbo the night that he fought Sean, but, I was there. But it was that press conference that really impressed me. Kimbo sat there behind us with Ray Mercer, and when the questions were asked, because all the cameras were on him, Kimbo said, man, don't make this about me. He goes, I know why this fight is what it is and why the cameras are here, but it's about all these guys down here, man. He said, man, he goes, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm just a street guy. I'm just a street guy, and I had this opportunity to fight, and I fought, and I lost, and I'm here because of people want me here, and give it to these guys, man. These are the real fighters. And that was I was like, whoa, I became a hero. I became a fan of Kimbo. And then, obviously, that was a week or two before the fights. We have the weigh-ins, and, the weigh-ins, he was the same, it was the same, we had the weigh-ins next door, same humbleness, and then just the night of the fight, just the way he carried himself was incredible. He beat Ray Mercer. He beat him at his game. He outstruck him. And then, I don't think I ever met Kimbo. I don't think I ever met him thereafter again. But then I became a fan. I followed him all the way to the Ultimate Fighter show, through the UFC. Yeah, we see people, or you hear people who talk shit about people. I never saw a lot of talk when looking at all the online stuff regarding the fight about Sean negatively, some things, but I saw a lot of people talk negatively about Kimbo. Especially when you got in the UFC, and you people have no idea what you're talking about. Why wouldn't Kimbo take the opportunity when people are looking I did see Kimbo. I went out to Vegas. I was when we were. I'm trying to think of now at what stage. I can't remember. I went out to Vegas twice. Once when Stephen Bonner was getting ready to fight Forrest Griffin, because we had just left. We just got back from Thailand. Me and Stephen went out there with a crew of people, with Mark Delagrati, and we went out to Vegas, and we were at Randy Couture's gym, and then another time. But Kimbo was out there training with Randy, getting ready for that fight. So prior to him fighting Sean, yeah, he had no ground experience, but when he had that opportunity to fight, he could have just went for the paycheck, just like when James Toney fought Randy Couture at the Garden. He had no ground experience. He didn't care to have any ground experience. He just went for that $500,000, okay? And that fight, just so you know, was put on to show Boston boxing big brass people that a boxer cannot hang with a well-rounded, low-level MMA fighter. That's why that fight happened at the Boston Garden. But when Kimbo had this opportunity to fight, he put his training in. He did the best he could do, and he continued training in ground, become the best that he can. So he put that effort in. So why wouldn't he take that money that was being offered him and then put the work in? So for anyone that said to Kimbo Slice, I know this is, Sean's my boy, but Kimbo's my boy, not even knowing the guy. He put the work in as much as he could to be the best MMA fighter he could, and give him that credit, all right? Give him that credit. He did the best he could, and man, he fought. He went in there. He knocked out Tank. He went in there and put his best that he could, and the dude's a real fighter. So they're both passed away. So rest in peace to both of them. It's crazy that the biggest underground fight ever to occur, and they're both no longer here. Sad story, because they were both great people. So God rest their souls.